Shigu presented to match on the first day of the year, overlooking the court. The dipper's handle begins to point horizontal. The three beginnings of the year renew the imperial throne. Before the royal screen, the invited 100 officials, the hanging tassels of the imperial 9 ranks. In fine order, like pheasants or herons, in great crowds of hairpins and belts. From the ends of the earth, your words are translated over and over as regions where the sun rises offer rare treasures. Okay, so we continue today with a poem by Shigu. In fact, this is his only surviving poem, and it seems it's probably incomplete. It's probably lacking a few verses. So Shigu is a poet who lived in the last years of the 6th century, first half of the 7th. This is the period of transition from the 6 dynasties and the Shui to the Tang. He belonged to a family of important scholars and intellectuals. His grandfather, for example, Jiang Shitui, was one of the great intellectuals of the late 6 dynasties, serving in the courts of Northern Qi and Northern Zhou, and writing a book, the Family Instructions of the Yang Clan, which has actually been translated into English. Yang Shigu got to a pretty early start, serving, I think, under Shui Wendi, the founder of and the best ruler of the short-lived Shui dynasty, but he mostly developed his work under Emperor Tang Taizong. He was put into the service of Taizong in 621 at the time of the Tang rebellion against the Shui. He served in who was then the crown princess in Tarij, but later, became one of the intellectuals at the court of Tang Taizong. The poem, and he occupied different positions of importance in the secretariat and in other important palace offices. Now, this poem is very representative of the early Tang poetry of which we've spoken before. So early Tang poetry is really very much a continuation of 6 dynasties poetry. It's mainly an aristocratic and courtly pastime which had been developed mostly in the south of China during the period of disunion. It's a poetry that is focused on aesthetic and pleasurable effects and subject matter, not Confucian, not very moralistic like a lot of classical Chinese poetry tends to be or strives to be. And this poetry had become, as I said, very aristocratic. Members of the upper classes in the south, and also when the Tang was founded in Emperor Taizong's court, were expected to, be cognizant of this poetry and to be able to compose extempore. Of course, this means that these poems were not really, as a genre, this early Tang poetry is not very original, tends to be very conventional, restricted in diction and in topics, usually overtly optimistic, poems generally composed in praise of the seasons and of the imperial power, poems composed in response to somebody else's poems as part of a courtly game. This is an example of these. So this poem is presented to match on the first day of the year overlooking the court. And this is matching a poem by Emperor Taizong himself. Emperor Taizong had some intellectual leanings, and he had composed a poem, Chengri Lin Chao, on the first day of the year, overlooking the court. So that's a poem in pentasyllabic lines, couplets joined together. Not a regulated poem or anything of the sort. And then, it's a poem just describing the view of the emperor, how the courtiers all surround him in the beginning of the year ceremony that takes place at the imperial palace. So this is a piece of, you could say, ham-fisted flattery. It's a poem answering the emperors, probably matching the rhymes and other aspects of the original poem. And also, as you can see from the subject matter, it's a poem that praises the emperor in his benevolent rule. So in a way, it's depicting another scene, another take of the same scene that is depicted in the emperor's poem. So the topic, as we say, is, describing an event, a New Year's Day ceremony, master of civil servants in front of the emperor for the ceremonies of the new year. and a celebration of the power and goodness of Emperor Taizong's rule, and of how far the admiration for the rule of the emperor has extended. Okay, let's take a look at the poem as usual, couplet by couplet. So, first couplet. The dipper's handle begins to point horizontal. The three beginnings of the year renew the imperial throne. So, as usual, the first, this is 1, 2, 3, this is 4 couplets, 8 lines. So, like, the form looks like a regulated poem, although we should remember that regulated poems are really a high tang form of poetry. That's when the meter, the form, crystallizes and becomes conventional, although it was experimented, and similar things to regulated poems appeared before the high tang, and this is probably a good example. So the first couplet, as usual in these poems, sets the chronotope, the time and place of the poem. This is already obvious from the title, but the first couplet hammers it in. So the dipper's handle begins to point horizontal. The dipper is, the Ursa Major and the constellation of the Big Bear, or the Dipper. And its handle, that is the long line of stars, is pointing northwards, which means it's the beginning of the year. This would be spring, late winter, early spring, I suppose. And so we have this heavenly constellation pointing towards the North Star. The North Star usually acts as a symbol, a metaphor for the emperor in lots of Chinese poems, because it's the immovable star in the center around which all the other stars and constellations turn around. So we have the dipper in the heavens, and in the earth, as in the heavens, so in the earth. The three beginnings of the year renew the imperial throne, where the three beginnings are the beginning of the year, obviously, because this is a ceremony on the first day of the new year. Also, the beginning of the month is the first day of the first month. And also, it's a morning ceremony, so it's at the beginning of the day, at sunrise. And the ceremony is renewing the imperial throne. Like, the years pass, year after year, and these ceremonies of renewal will hint at, evoke, try to convey the idea of the never-ending, repeating cycle of good imperial rule, just like the years and the seasons pass and follow their cycles. So here we have the wish of a cycle of renewal of emperorship and good rulership. Second couplet. So as usual, the second couplet zooms in and gives us a more visual, in this case, scene of this first day overlooking the court. Before the royal screen, the invited 100 officials, the hanging tassels of the imperial 9 ranks. So in these ceremonies, the emperor would be on a sort of basilica in the imperial palace, behind some screens and curtains. Only the closest courtiers would be near the person of the emperor. From behind that screen, the stairs leading down would lead to a sort of big plaza or square, and there would, in serried ranks, all the officers, Confucian officials, all the civil servants be placed in ranked geometric orders. Now, if you've seen the movie The Last Emperor by Bernardo Bertolucci, you would get a very good depiction of what this morning muster at the beginning of the new year would look like. There is a scene in which Puyi is, coming outside and he walks through the ranks of the officials who are standing in the square of the imperial palace. So it's this sort of thing. And it's depicted in the poem from the royal perspective. Because remember, the first poem was composed by Taizong, describing what he sees from his throne. And here, well, you get a general view, but it's before the royal screen, so the focus, the camera, is placed in the emperor's seat. So what does the emperor see before his royal screen? Are the officials. So lots of officials, and they're the 100 officials. This is a rhetorical number, but there probably could be more than 100. And their clothing, their hanging tassels of the imperial 9 ranks. The bureaucracy, the civil service bureaucracy had 9 ranks, and each of them implies certain types of clothing, certain ranks of privilege. So they have these hats that look a bit like mortarboards with hanging tassels. Depending on your rank, you could have more or less tassels, and of course the emperor had the most. Okay, next couplet. So this couplet, the second couplet, has described what the emperor sees, his officials. The third couplet goes in a more literary vein, making a comparison or a metaphor of these serried ranks of officials. So it says, third couplet, in fine order, like pheasants or herons, in great crowds of hairpins and bells. So this is a parallelistic couplet. If this were a regulated poem, the previous couplet and this one would be the ones strictly parallel with antithetic parallelism. So yeah, the emperor sees these people, and they're like, you know, herons and pheasants, colorful animals, because they're wearing robes of different colors, I presume, as there's different colors would denote different ranks, different levels in the courtly hierarchy. So they look like a flock of birds just in front of the emperor, in fine order. And also, you know, they're wearing pieces of metal and jewelry, which are visible, the hairpins, the belts. The order is important, in fine order. The order of the officials in front of the emperor is acting as a mirror for the order of the whole kingdom, which, you know, this is a piece of imperial propaganda. So like the Chinese ideal is harmony. The emperor is supposed to be the most virtuous ruler and person, and he is like the wind. He blows, and the people are like the grass. They bend under the beneficent influence of the ruler. And order is really, really valued in Confucian and traditional imperial political views of society. Like everybody occupies their proper rank. In this geometry, this harmony evokes the ideal social order that a good ruler brings about. And last couplet, fourth couplet. As usual, if the first couplet of a poem like this usually introduces time and place, the last couplet either introduces directly the feelings that the whole scene has evoked in the poet, or summarizes the whole message of the poem if it has a sort of, either if it's an emotional message that is being conveyed or a political message that is being transmitted. Here, the last line extends this court ceremony from the boundaries of the palace to the boundaries of empire. The good rulership is not just influencing and affecting the scholar officials at court, it's reaching the ends of the empire. From the ends of the earth, your words are translated over and over. As regions where the sun rises offer rare treasures. So the beneficent rule of the emperor, well, the Tang had expanded the imperial domain widely and the frontiers quite widely. Taizong was a warrior emperor who subdued most of the northern barbarians, the Turks, and had become their Kagang. So the rule of the emperor, so this is not just empty rhetoric, there is a bit of truth here. So from the ends of the earth, your words are translated. So the imperial edicts are sent to the provinces and to peoples who might not understand or speak Chinese. So the imperial edicts and orders have to be translated, and they come back to, well, the answers come back to the court. But this extensive reach of the emperor's words are concomitant with the extent of his power and virtue. That is what is implied here. And as regions where the sun rises offer rare treasures, just as the words of the emperor go out into the regions, the treasures of the provinces, of those faraway places, come in to the empire. And this is not meant to be like a cynical sort of exploitation of the barbarians. They are tribute. These exotic goods that come, these rare treasures that come from the regions, are tribute by which the subordinates recognize their subordinate status, but also their ties to the imperial polity and the emperor's person. And you know, the Tang era was a very cosmopolitan period in which Tang culture extended into Central Asia, and in which much borrowing of products and culture and lots of commerce came into China. Musical instruments, different types of food. This is very well represented in a very good book by Edwin Schaffer, The Golden Peaches of Samarkand. Anyway, that's the poem for today. I wouldn't say it's one of the best poems we've read in the collection, but I think it's very representative of this type of early Tang panegyric poetry that was really representative of the early period of the Tang Dynasty.